in the Soviet ufology and personalities. So, there is information out there. It's putting it all together. That's interesting. I wish we had more time and maybe talk a little bit about China and even the province where there was this huge earthquake recently. I published an article, I believe last year, in Fate magazine about the Sichuan province. I mean, this place is full of paranormal phenomena. And in China, the government is quite different from here or in Russia or the UK when it comes to study of UFOs. They encourage it, and there are thousands of scientists who are involved in UFO research. What's interesting, I want to mention here,
sure.
Sichuan province went through this horrible earthquake, and I worry about the artifacts, the ancient pyramids that have been found there, the so-called star towers, and there is a lot more. But I want to mention that just before the earthquake, in the years before the earthquake, there had been a lot of sightings of UFOs confirmed by scientists and Chinese military. And I find it interesting that before great natural disasters, you do get to see UFOs in the area, be it Central Asia in the Soviet Union or Sichuan in China. And whoever is listening and, is interested in ufology in other places, not just the United States, should pay attention to China.
Marla is in Vegas on Coast to Coast AM for Paul Stonehill. Marla?
Right, hi. How are you doing tonight? I wanted to let you know there is a website called emeraldtreasure.com. About 15 years ago, one of my business associates knew a gentleman who discovered a huge treasure of emeralds that sank off of the coast of Mexico back in 1756. He was asked by the family of a woman from Portugal to search for this. This was a treasure from Montezuma, from Cortez. They located this treasure by asking two psychics to locate the actual location of the sunken ship, which sank in 1756. They gave them two psychics maps where they both picked the same spot. The divers dove down, and just where the psychics chose the spot, they located a crystal skull. Now, this crystal skull was part of the treasure, and you can see the entire treasure, which is on this emeraldtreasure.com. The gentleman's name was Victor Benelis, who located the treasure. It's AD Ventures. The thing was on Time magazine. It was in Treasure Diver magazine. And
we'll take a look at it.
Apparently, this skull was they felt that it was almost beaming, and they dove down. Boom, there it was. And so I thought you should take a look at this. It's really, really cool.
We'll take a look at it right now. Thank you for that heads up. That psychic piece reminds me of something I wanted to ask you about earlier. In my research on Paul Stonehill this week, I came across this great piece about the world's best psychic, right? Who's this guy, Messing? Is that his name?
Wolf Messing, a Polish-Jewish refugee who was able to evade Gestapo and found refuge in the Soviet Union. Hitler wanted his head, because he predicted that Hitler's armies will be crushed by the Soviet Union if he starts wars against Soviet Russia. In any event, he had incredible psychic powers, which he wanted to understand completely, but there was no one to study him. He had done a lot of good work in the Soviet Union, helping his adopted nation defeat Nazis, and all his life, he was nevertheless suspected because, first of all, his powers could not be explained by Marxism-Leninism, and they did not like that he had powers that cannot be explained, but they kind of left him alone because obviously he contributed so much. But the thing is, because of him, we can understand the mysterious qualities of human psyche and the brain. This man was a hypnotist, a clairvoyant. He was a telepath. He was everything put together, and no one knows how it happened. And when he died, he took his powers with him. There was no one in the Soviet Union who would not be afraid to study him, but apparently he could predict future by looking at a photograph. He was able to find, he had remote viewing capabilities in him. He was basically a great man. But every time he had a demonstration of his powers in the Soviet Union, and during different concerts that he was allowed to have, and appearances, there was an official from the Communist Party saying that what he has, and they gave some feeble explanation of his powers, trying to say that what he has is not really telepathic or clairvoyant and so forth. He gave a lot of help to the Soviet intelligence and during the 1940s, and he knew almost to the day when Nazis will be crushed, and he wasn't afraid to tell it to Stalin. Actually, just before the World War started, because few people in the Soviet Union wanted to tell it to Stalin because he didn't believe it.
Right.
He believed Hitler until the end, until January 2nd, 1941.
There are a lot of people that come out of the Soviet Union or former Soviet Union, that part of the country, part of the world rather, that have unique abilities. Is there something about Russia or Eurasia? Is there something about that produces some of the world's best known, or at least most revered psychics?
I know about a few. I think that Eurasia itself, you're looking at ancient continents, and ancient continent and all the knowledge of China. I always like to bring up China as well because we know so little about it. But what I know, just from my research, based in Russian and some other sources, is incredible. Now, I'm sure they knew about the power of the mind thousands of years ago. They had a lot of discoveries we don't even have today. They had ancient telescopes in their past. The Chinese did. They had devices, as I mentioned before, about that helped them find out a person's sickness. They had much more. They had, and in my writings, I also mentioned, the legends of the first emperor, and definite indications of visitation of the planet by superior beings. And you're asking me that. There is so much more. America is a young continent. Is a young country, and South America, of course, it had incredible knowledge before, but the conquistadors destroyed it. And what's left? Burned out manuscripts or dubious skulls. That's all we have.
I went to that website. Interesting, on the emeraldtreasure.com website, there was a lot of discussion about these skulls. Not many pictures of them. There's a picture of a jade or an emerald mask, but I'd like to see more photos of that, but I appreciate the heads up from Marla. Let's go to Tiffany in Cypress, California on Coast to Coast AM for Paul Stonehill. Tiffany?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you very much for taking my call. I was wondering, with regard to the recent increase of sightings reported, do you think it's really an increase in alien activity, or are we just seeing more?
We could see more. I mean, we had enough capabilities to see more from 1950s on, I would say. I think there is definite an increase. We don't live in the quietest of times, and I think there is more knowledge among a certain structure, certain, let's say, entities on our planet about the increase of visitations and what we should expect. And again, go back to Vatican. All of a sudden, now they say that it's okay to speak about the aliens, to believe in them. Some other religions too. I think there is more knowledge, cryptic knowledge that we may not know about, that certain entities possess, and I mean organizations, churches, governments, and maybe now is the time that they decided to release it. Why? I don't know. Maybe something is coming our way.
Sanjaya is in Hilo, Hawaii. He'll get the last question for Paul Stonehill on Coast to Coast AM. Sanjaya?
Yeah, hi. I was calling to ask Paul if he'd ever seen the movie The Abyss. about the UFOs underwater?